everyone who's coming in. I'll try not to be too repetitive as more people come in. I'll just welcome everyone who is here. For everyone, I know Amada just mentioned if you can go into the Slack channel and join the July 28th meetup channel. This way we could find you all. The Slack team is a growing Slack community with lots of channels to find help about R or Python, even Git and Julia. We had someone post actually a Julia question, and I'm trying to connect them with the head of the Julia meetup. I'm just trying to dig that up. And we have all sorts of stuff, and then we announce events, both about our community and other communities. And we have study groups in there, so it's a lot of good stuff happening in there. We're just hitting the 6 o'clock mark. As I told people, they'll be able to come in, so a lot of them are starting to get picking up. Amada found a way to have a link directly to the channel, which I have still not figured out how to do, so thank you for doing that, Amada.
Hopefully it works, but you definitely have to join NYHackR first.
All right. And folks, you just have to join NYHackR. See in there, Steve now saying hello from Boston, where it's 93 degrees. I'm not even sure what it is anywhere else, but I know it's hot everywhere in the Northeast right now. Now, Stephen Howe, Boston or like Boston area? Are you really coming from Newton or Cambridge or one of those other places? Maybe that place starts with an S, so I can't remember. Downtown. Oh, you're right across from South Station. Nice area. At least normally. Not sure how it is during the pandemic. That's a great part of town. I can imagine it's quiet. So if someone is asking, there is audio on for attendees. You should be able to get audio to hear the speakers, but not to actually speak yourselves. But you cannot hear myself. This is going to actually not going to hear me. So Amada, if you could put in the chat saying that they could always dial into their phone if they can't hear me, but there will attendees can't chat.
Okay.
Utah. Someone's coming from Utah. I've only ever spent 2 nights in Utah. I was in Salt Lake City, but they were really nice 2 nights. Great food and even a great beer scene. I really enjoyed the brewery I went to. Erob, hi. Erob in Utah. So I only saw in your name I just say EMI, but now Erob makes a lot more sense. So you're not in Salt Lake City. You're off in all those other cities. I can't remember the name of, but Park City. That's it. Well, enjoy it. All right, great. I'm gonna mute my notifications. So. All right, we're starting to get a bit of a critical mass. We'll slowly get started with some of the announcements we usually make. And I'll repeat some of these as people come in. So first up, welcome. So everyone is here. I said welcome a bunch of times. I will continue to say welcome to everyone trickling in. It's very great to have you for what is now, I believe, our 4th virtual meetup. Yep, our 4th one. These things have been going strong. So we got our last in-person meetup right before most of the country went into lockdown. Luckily, I haven't heard of anyone falling ill. And is our 4th virtual one. We have been lucky to get speakers from all around the world. That's the bright side. Instead of just people who are passing through New York or living in New York or the area, we're having speakers from all over the world as we have tonight. So one thing we are not able to do as much when we are virtual because no one can shout out in this group is jobs. Who is hiring? But fortunately, in the Slack channel, in the Slack team Amada linked to, we have a channel called job postings. And this is good all year round, whether there's a pandemic or not. If you have a job you want to announce, go to job postings, job-postings. If you're looking for a job, go to job-postings to find the jobs. We'll hopefully that collision of people who are hiring and people who are looking for jobs will meet there. I know we've gotten many people's jobs through this meetup. So I'm always super excited whenever we can get someone else a job. It's really great. Another thing we can't do anymore in person, but I hope everyone's doing individually, is pizza. So I got my slice this month from a place called Conti's. CONTE''S. You can see here it's a super thin crust, very hard, has good cheese lock. The cheese is not sliding right off the plate. Some good charring on the back. You can tell it's a gas oven. So that's very interesting. You know, gas ovens are probably the most typical type of oven. It makes her good, what most people think of as Northeastern pizza. So hopefully everyone has their own slice. If anyone did get their own pizza as encouraged, shout out in the Slack channel. Let us know where you're eating from. Always fun to see where different people are getting pizza from. We love seeing that. So hopefully you can enjoy this with us. I know I always enjoy the pizza at least. Next month is our big month of our events. We have the R Conference, August 12th through 15th. We're really excited about that. We're working really hard. Amada here has been working nonstop, trying to make this not just a bunch of talking heads on a screen. We have some things in store for you if you're coming that you'll see. We're not going to tell you right now, so they're meant to be some surprises. They're going to make it more interactive than just a plain virtual conference. If you want to learn more, you go to rstats.ai. Amada, if you could put that in the chat, rstats.ai. And since you're members of this meetup, and the conference is really meant to be an outgrowth of the community. That's how it all got started. 6 years ago, I said to some friends, let's have a 2-day party about R. And some people let me do it. So since you're part of this community and really grew out of this community, you could use the code NYHackR for a 20% discount on the conference and the workshops. We have about, I think, 7 different workshops spread across 2 days. Max Kuhn is already sold out, but we still have David Robinson teaching the Tidyverse, Kaz Sakamoto teaching GIS, Dan Chen teaching Git. We have Amanda Dobbin teaching RVest. We have, I know I'm going to forget someone here. I know we have Vivian Peng teaching Shiny. We have another one which is escaping me. We also have Andreas Mueller, believe it or not, teaching scikit-learn. Yes, we are having a Python machine learning workshop at the R conference because this community, remember, it is the Open Statistical Programming Meetup. We are R and friends. We've had talks on Python, on Julia, on Go, on SQL. There it is. And I did not leave anybody out. Yes, thankfully I did not leave anybody out. Amada just posted an image on the Slack channel. Again, NYHackR gets you 20% off of the workshops as well. And they're a lot of fun. I've seen a bunch of these workshops before. I've even taken I've sat in on Andreas's workshop to heckle him a little bit as the R person. But I've been in almost all these workshops at various points. Very excited to have these going on. Remember, the workshops are August 12th through 13th. And the conference itself is August 14th through 15th. In our speaker lineup, we have Andrew Gelman, we have E-Rob who's here, we have Max Kuhn, we have David Smith, we have Heather and Jacqueline Nolis. We have both Nolises. It's going to be a lot of fun. Many more people, I'm not even saying the names of, there's too many to list them all. It's going to be a lot of fun. And as has become our tradition for the conference, we have a meetup the week of the conference also, just to make it more work for us. So that Monday, August 10th, we have Miles McBain coming to us from Australia, I believe, talking about Drake. This all started because he posted something on Twitter. I asked him a lot of questions on Twitter about how do I use Drake, and he helped me out so much. So I emailed him and said, no good deed goes unpunished. Do you want to give a talk at the meetup now? He happily agreed. So he is our R Week speaker this time. He'll be speaking Monday, and the conference is Wednesday through Saturday. So that will be announced hopefully tomorrow. On August 10th, we'll have Miles McBain talking about Drake for the meetup as part of the conference. I would like to thank EcoHealth Alliance for giving us the Zoom link this month and every month so far. And not just EcoHealth Alliance, but also Noam Ross. He has been our helper there. So everyone give a virtual applause for Noam and EcoHealth Alliance for helping us out. Thank you very much. Also, I'd like to thank Scott's Pizza Tours for giving 20% discount code to all members of the meetup. I know the code is supposed to work through July, but if all of a sudden a lot of you use it, I can ask him to extend it. He's been sponsoring the meetup for the past few months, giving virtual pizza tours. Colin is new to our community here. You see how obsessed, at least I am, with pizza and how I've imposed that on the group. Every month, we typically have pizza from different place, and we have people vote it on a pizza poll. So we're very excited about that. I'm really into pizza, in case it wasn't obvious. As we are going tonight's meetup, please ask the questions in the Slack channel. If you do it in the Slack put chat, I'll see it, but it's much easier for me. When you put into the Slack channel, I will collate all the questions, then I will ask Colin the questions at the end. We found that's the best way to get questions to the speaker. So please go ahead and ask the questions in the Slack channel that Amada sent out, and I'll ask them all at the end. Afterwards, people feel free to hang around if you want to ask questions in the Slack channel. We can all hang out, get a virtual happy hour. We tried it in the past with video. You know, we can't do video on Zoom with everybody, but we can do a chatting happy hour, whatever you would like. So all that, just a reminder, jobs in the jobs channel. Enjoy your pizza. The meetup and conference next month, August 10th, then 12th through 15th. Use NYHackR for your discount code. Miles McBain will be our meetup speaker. Thank you, Eco Health Alliance. Thank you, Scott's Pizza Tours. And coming all the way from France, a special treat. Please welcome Colin. And I'll give a virtual applause right here. Thank you very much, Colin.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to start by sharing my screen. And unfortunately, I don't have any pizza because, you know, it's midnight in France. So I've eaten my dinner a few hours back. So I'm just going to present tonight's topic, which is testing Shiny before sending it to production. Let me share this. I'm going to turn off my video so the bandwidth is better. Okay, so we are here today to talk about testing Shiny with the title, Everything Not Tested Will Eventually Fail. So first of all, a little presentation about, a little thing about me. So I work in a company called Fincar. So we are in France, and we are focused on everything around data science and data engineering with R. I also do a lot of open source work, and I'm notably the lead developer for the Golem project. So Golem is a project for building Shiny application that will be then sent to production. So a few links here. So if you want to complain about what I'm going to say, please reach me on Twitter. If you want to follow some of my open source work, it's on GitHub, and I also have a website where I blog about R and engineering stuff around R. So Fincar is a company which does data science engineering, mainly focused on R, as its name suggests. So we do training, we do software engineering around R, we do R in production, and we do consulting. So software engineering and R in production includes building Shiny applications that are then sent into production, and consulting also means that we audit some Shiny applications that need to be sent to production. So these three things that we do, software engineering, R in production, consulting, involves writing tests for these Shiny application that we send to production. So we have some experience on it. So this is why this is what I'm going to be talking about today. So everything not tested will eventually fail. So this is a talk about how to write and how to build your tests for Shiny application before sending them to production. So I chose this title because I think that when we today talk about testing Shiny, we focus on some specific things and not on some others. So some Shiny apps are sent to production without testing some of the important sides of Shiny application in production. So little aside before I start, so I like to remind what we mean by production. So what does production even mean? So what I mean when I say production is that, for me, a piece of software is in production if it's used, even if it's by only one person. So even if you have an application that is used by only one person, as far as I'm concerned, it's in production if it's also relied upon and has real life impact. So what I mean is that an application even used by one person who relies on this application to do the job, to take decisions, to do their daily job and to make decisions based on the output of this application is a piece of software that is in production. So we regularly hear that when we hear the term production, we hear like big data and scaling to billions of users and things like that. But I think that hides a side of production which is smaller pieces of software that are used by smaller groups that need these pieces of software for doing their daily job. So if you go to any company which is not a software engineering company, they have like the software they use on a daily basis, which possibly have been built by a software engineering company, especially for them. So maybe just a handful of people are using this software, but it's still something which is in production. So it's software which is relied upon by the user, but also by the developer. So if you are developing a software that is to be sent to production, you rely on this software to be available, to be accurate, to be modular, and to be resilient. That is to say that if things go wrong, you need to be able to catch the bug, to fix them. And of course, for you as a developer, it has real life impact because you are working on this software, and if something goes wrong, it's going to have some impact on your job. So what is the current state of unit test? So there are more or less two states of unit test, which is that people don't write any test. So basically, of course, a software which has no unit test can't fail because there are no unit tests. And the other side is people who write too many tests, so that people that spend hours and hours of development time writing tests. And maybe something other people that are in the middle, I don't know if they are writing good code or bad unit tests. So first of all, why would you want to test your Shiny application before sending it into production? I like this image about unit tests, which is the Titanic, and so all these little parts passed the unit test. So it's a good metaphor for everything that's not tested will eventually break. So if you send something into production, if you send your boat on the sea and you have tested only some parts of your application, chances are that other parts will at some point in time break. So when a software breaks, that means that maybe you are on call and you are the one who is going to have to fix these bugs. Also, a good quote from Jenny Bryan, who said, if you are writing a software that has no unit tests, you let your users be your unit tests. That is to say that if you are writing a software, if you're writing a Shiny application, you send it to production and people start using it and you don't have written any unit test, you expect the people to find the bugs in your software. So it's depending, of course, on the context of the development and on the people who are using the application. But it's really a bad user experience to have a new software at work that you rely on to do your job, that you are going to use on a daily basis, and every time you open it, it fails, or every time you try to do something, it just crashes. So if you are not writing any unit test, you are expecting your users to find them and to come to you and to complain about them. Also, another thing that is sometimes forgotten about test is testing how many resources your application is going to need. So basically, you are writing a Shiny application on your computer, and you have a MacBook, or I don't know, with something like 16 gigabytes of RAM, and the application works, and you don't really think about how many resources it takes to run your application on your computer. But that's something that is different when you have to send your application to production, because your application is going to run on someone else's computer, most of the time on, I don't know, an AWS or a Google Cloud Platform, or maybe you have a server with RStudio Connect or RStudio Server or something like that. And that means that this application will run on a server with limited resources, with resources that cost money. So this is something that is regularly forgotten when it comes to testing Shiny. It's how many resources my application need. And little story about testing Shiny. So I've put recently I've audited Shiny application, which I put to our RStudio Connect server, and I did a typo when I launched my load test. And instead of, so I wanted to mimic the behavior of 50 people, and I typed 500. So basically it mimicked 500 connections to the Shiny app on my RStudio Connect server, and basically it crashed the server, and I created a denial of service on my own server by testing this application. But what that means is that if I had put this application on my server without controlling the load and controlling these kind of things, if ever that much people had tried to connect to my application, my server would have crashed. So basically, I received this application to audit it and to optimize it, and I ended up doing a denial of service on my own server. So why testing your application? So the two stages during development, you want to test because you want to safely collaborate, and you want to be able to change things on a project safely. So making changes to a project and to a code base should be pain-free. That is to say that you shouldn't be scared to change something and to break something, because if something breaks, bugs are detected if they are tested. And of course, a good testing strategy on your Shiny application allows new people to come and to work and to try things, because we can try to change, we can try to change the code base, to move things, and as long as the tests are still running correctly, they are sure that they are working correctly on the project. But also in production, it also means that you are safely serving your application, because your user should not be your unit test. As I said before, you should think that serving an application costs money. So You shouldn't spend $1 million on AWS because I think Jeff Bezos is rich enough. So you should try to lower your expense and try to not DOS, and try not to clutter your server with too many resources needed by your Shiny applications. So this is something that you should think upfront before sending your application to production. So second part, in the what, let's talk about the what. So the first thing that you are going to want to test, and the first thing that a lot of people focus on is testing the user interface. So the user interface refers to what the users see, what they interact with, the general design of your application. And my advice regarding user interface testing is that if your time is limited, and chances are that your time will be limited when doing a Shiny project, if you have to choose, don't focus too much on pure user interface. So don't focus too much on testing the user interface. Why? Because I think the most important thing to test in a Shiny application, even more in a context of a Shiny app where we are designing application to analyze data and to make prediction, or to build graphs, or to build things that will help other people take decisions. So this business logic in a context of data science product is very important, because you should be certain that this part of your application is accurate, that it returns the correct results, the correct graph. So all this, the core algorithms that makes your application unique, all these functions that contain your business knowledge, all these functions that produce results that your users are going to rely on, these are the functions you should, in the first time, be focusing on. So if you have to prioritize your testing strategy, I think you should first spend time on testing this business logic as extensively as possible. And finally, the third thing, which is something which is regularly forgotten, is the application load, because poor app performance leads to a bad user experience, and potentially it costs money. So when I talk about application load, is how many CPU and RAM does your application need? Because if you are not able to estimate this, it will lead to a slow application. So people are going to try to connect, but the Shiny application will be very slow. Shiny application won't produce any results. The graph will take a long time to render. And basically, at some point, they are going to stop using your application because the performances are too bad. And this is actually something important to know upfront, because it's not the same to build a Shiny application that is going to be deployed for 1 people, for 10 people, or for thousands of people. We usually hear that Shiny doesn't scale, or we hear on the other hand that JavaScript scales well, or that other languages scale well. But the thing is that, for example, Facebook, they didn't use, so they had, Facebook had specific requirements when it comes to scaling, so they started writing their own version of JavaScript and their own backend languages just to be able to manage the load they need. So why am I saying that? I'm saying that because if your application needs to scale, you need to know it upfront, because writing an application for a small amount of people is not the same as writing an application for thousands and thousands of users. For example, if you have an application that serves to 1,000 of people, you might want to put the data inside your application, because the data takes a small amount of RAM, and it still can be managed by the server. But if your application needs to scale to thousands of people, you are not going to put your data set inside your application. You are going to use an external database and something with high performance, and something that you can make a lot of requests on very quickly. So this application load, if you are building an application that needs to scale, it's very important to anticipate it. So how do we do that? How do we test all these things that I've just said? First of all, how to test the business logic or the backends of your application. So this is something that is easily done if you follow the idea of building Shiny apps as a package. So this is something which is supported by the Golem framework. So when you build a Shiny application using the Golem framework, you are building your Shiny app as a package. And one of the big idea behind building Shiny app as a package is that you should try to separate as much as possible the business logic from the interactive logic. That is to say that all the core algorithms of your application should be written as standard R function. Why? Because it allows to leverage all the things that have been created along the years for building robust packages. So be it the documentation, be it the dependency management, but also for the testing, you can leverage the standard testing frameworks to test this business logic, this backend of your application. So for example, if you are building a Shiny application as a package, you can use the test that package. So the test that package allows you to write a series of expectations. So you write contexts and expectations. For example, if in my example, I have a function called meaning of life. So let's say that meaning of life is one of my core backend functions, and I'm expecting this function to return 42 every time I call it. So the idea is that when the users are going to use the application, they are going to expect this result. So here I'm writing a test today with my backend function that returns 42, and I'm sure that this is what I want today. And I don't know, maybe in 6 months, because you know, when you are working on production application, it might take a long time. So if in 6 months you come back to your application, you change this function and it no return, I don't know, 43, you are sure that you are going to catch this change. So this change might be the correct one. So maybe you want this function to change, but at least you are sure that you are catching this change, and that inside the next version of your application, you are going to make the changes, and it's a deliberate change, not a bug. So this, for the backend, testing the backend with TestVet, which is a standard testing framework for our functions. So as I said, writing Shiny app as a package allow you to leverage all these things. But you will also want to test the user interface or the front end. And for that, I'm going to present 3 tools. So Shiny Tests, which test visual regression of your application. Puppeteer, which is a command line tool written in Node.js that drives an headless Chrome session and mocks a connection to your application and interactions. And another package in R, which is inspired by what Puppeteer does, which is called Cry, which is a tool to drive Shiny session from the command line and to interact with this Shiny session, because Puppeteer can connect to any web page, because it's not specific to Shiny nor to R. It's really specific to JavaScript. So Shiny Tests first. Shiny Tests, it allows you to record snapshots of an app. So snapshots of the state of your application. So how it works is that you are launching your application. You are taking snapshots of your application at given moment. So at specific moments. Then you can change things and you can replay the application, and then you can detect if there are any visual regression inside your application. So it's really focused on visual changes. So it's really if you want to detect things that have changed on the UI. So I don't use Shiny Tests that much because I think this is not, I don't think this is the thing you should be focusing the most when building Shiny Test. So I use Puppeteer for some of my tests. So it allows you to record the interaction with the application. So it then replays, so it will launches and it replays the interaction with Node.js, and then it detects if there are any application logic changes. So basically, instead of detecting that your application has visually changed, it detects that, I don't know, some of the button don't work anymore, some of the UI elements are not available anymore. Doing this or that makes the application crash. So it focuses on replaying the application logic and not, it doesn't focus on the purely visual changes. So I've written here a bit of JavaScript code so that does Puppeteer tests. So if you read from top to bottom, so first you load the Puppeteer package, then you launch Puppeteer and you connect to the page. So for example, here I'm connecting to my local host. Then once this application is connected, I'm waiting for something in the DOM to be ready. And once it's ready, I'm clicking on it, and then I close the connection. So it's a small and it's not a real life test, but it's just so that you get the logic. So basically the idea is to repeat the actions you are performing with your application from the command line. And so you don't focus on visual changes, you focus on interactive logic. And the cool thing is that it has a Chrome extension. So it has a Chrome extension, and then what it does is that you click on record, and it records, it returns the Node.js code to replay the application. So you start the recording, you interact with your application, and then you can replay this code from Node.js without having to launch anything manually. So you don't have to launch any browser, you don't have to do the test yourself. So in the same spirit, the package called cry, which is a wrapper around another package called cri in French. So it's a remote. This first package, cri, is for doing remote orchestration of Chrome, and cry as specific recipes for Shiny apps. So basically, the idea is to connect to a Shiny app and to interact with it. And of course, the idea is to have everything scripted. So this is what it looks like. So you are creating a new testing session with, you can use page down, find Chrome to find the Chrome binary. Then you connect this Chrome binary to a random pause, and then you go to a web page. So it can be something online, or it can be something on your local machine. Then you wait for Shiny to be ready. So you launch the app, you connect to it, you launch the test launches Chrome, Chrome connects to the URL, and you wait for Shiny to be ready to receive inputs. Then, for example, here, can use a for loop to set values for a given input. Here I have an input with this long ID, so it's the package name in my application XMake, and I'm setting a series of letters for that input, and every time I run this Shiny set input, cry checks that Shiny is still working. So the idea is, for example, here to do some kind of brute force of input, in the sense that you can set a series of inputs. Here it's the letters, but it could be like random letters or random words or random numbers, just to check that if you set your input with this value, the application still works. And another cool libraries to do to test your interactive logic is called Gremlins. So it's a JavaScript library that simulates the wholes of Gremlin using an app. So the idea is that if you click on this, so you can install it as an extension to your browser, and it simulates random clicks and random scrolls on your application. So it allows to detect if your application is able to manage unexpected behaviors. So it's kind of a funny extension, because it just like does random things, and you are able to anticipate unexpected behaviors of your application. And so this is included in cry, so you can do it from your browser if you want, because it's like it's kind of funny to watch. But you can also use inside cry the function called gremlins hold. So it launches these holds of gremlin that interacts at random with your application. So you have to let it perform its work for a couple of seconds, and then you can check that your application is still working. So this is for testing the interactive logic of your application. Finally, testing your application load, so Shiny load test. So it's a native R package with a command line tool to record and to replay Shiny session and to perform load tests. Another package called Docker stats, which allows to get the stats for a Docker container inside R as a data frame. So it allows you to, for example, Docker stats as a column called memory usage. So if you want to test the RAM needed by a specific application inside the container, it can be used. And of course, you can combine cry and Docker stat, or even Shiny load test and Docker stats. So Shiny load test, it records a visit to the application, and then it will replay the app with multiple users, and it gives some detailed stats about response time and load. So the very nice thing is that you really have these detailed data about how your application responded to these numerous users. It can be used on your local machine, or what you can do, you can make Shiny load test connect to an application deployed on your server, and you can then record and analyze these data. The only downside I have found with Shiny load test so far is that you have to manually record the first session, but you say that you have to launch the session recording. You have to manually click and interact with your app before being able to do the load test. So Docker stat, what it does is that it's a wrapper around the command line Docker stats. Basically, it takes the stats from Docker and it turns it into an R data frame. It can be called recursively, that is to say that you can launch a function called Docker stat recursive, and it launches the function recursively. That is like every second it records the Docker stats. So that, for example, you launch this Docker stats function, which is recursive, and it records the stats for your containers every second you interact with your application, be it manually or with a script. And then at the end of your session, you have this data frame in R that you can analyze, and which you can plot. You can analyze the, for example, the memory usage. How it works, sorry, bad printing. So you are running the container. So for example, here I'm launching a container, and you call Docker stats, Docker stat. I had an issue when compiling my slides, because probably I had turned off Docker, but basically it returns here when you call this function, it returns a data frame with all the data. For example, you can be interested in the memory usage, the CPU usage, and the time of record. Yeah, as you can see, I have a message saying unable to find any container running. So that's because I had turned off my Docker engine before compiling these slides. Of course, what's interesting is to combine it, for example, with cry. So I'm getting the results from a first launch on the container, and then I'm setting a series of letters for my inputs, and every time I'm setting this input, I'm binding the result to the current recording, so the current state of my container, which can lead to this kind of graph, which allows you to watch how the memory usage evolves in time. So here on the x-axis, I have the record time. So you can see that at launch, my container takes this amount of RAM, and setting the first input makes my memory usage jump, and then I'm pretty stable when I change this input. So it allows you to watch your memory usage for a given container over time. So to conclude, test often and test as soon as possible. If you have to choose, focus on the backend, because if you spend too much time focusing on the UI, you won't have any time to focus on the backend. But the backend is, at the end of the day, the backend is what matters most. When I say backend, it's the core algorithm, what makes your application unique. And it's also the things that your user are going to rely on. It's, for example, it kind of doesn't matter if a button has changed from I don't know, pink to blue, but it does matter that a function returns 43 when it's supposed to return 42. So yeah, if you have to choose, focus on the backend. And interactive tests can and should be scripted as much as possible. And of course, don't forget to test the load of your application before sending it into production. So a series of links. So I'm going to put these slides online. So if you want to find all the tools I presented, you can click the link. And of course, these things are described in more detail in Facebook. We've been writing, which is called Engineering Production Grade Shiny Apps. It's available online for free. It's going to be available in print in a few months. You can find it on engineering-shiny.org. And if you want more detail about these methods, you'll find them here. And thank you. And now is the time for questions.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Hope everyone had a great time listening to it. So let's just say, again, a virtual round of applause for Colin. I spoke at a conference a few months ago at ERUM. They had like a virtual applause machine, like so they can make applause noise.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you were there, I think. I gotta figure out where they got that machine from. And that wasn't a machine, it was just like a file on the computer. I've got to find it so I could do that for our speakers.
There must be, a smartphone application to do that.
Oh, that's probably all it was. They probably had their phone. I thought it was like some plug-in for their computer. It's probably just a phone. All right, fine. I'm gonna go get that. I'm gonna go do that. Thank you for that idea. Okay, so we have a few questions. The first up is TestStat your favorite testing package? And if so, why do you find it so useful?
It's my favorite because I'd say that it's the one I know the most. So I couldn't speak for the other testing frameworks. I don't know them that well, but I know it's like the most widely used. So I don't know, it's the one I know. So I don't prefer it over another. I'm just the one I know. So yeah.
I say the same thing for me because I know there's RUnit and there's TinyTest, but that's the one I know as well because it's one of the easier ones to pick up, at least in my mind. Regarding the memory test from the Docker stats, it looked like the memory went up and down, up and down. That's what I assume the vertical lines were. I know that typically R doesn't release memory back to the operating system. So how do you get the drops in memory from a Docker process?
Oh yeah, so no, it's not a drop. So the vertical lines are new events. So setting a new input. It's not like a memory
Okay.
change. So basically, the line goes up and it's pretty flat.
And theoretically, it could only keep going up. It might spike, but it'll never go down.
Yeah. So the vertical line are just a new event. So setting a new input inside Shiny. So it's not like a memory doing that.
Okay, so you might be interested in like H to I. It went up. That's something that.
Yeah, it went. But yeah, I don't know. I just like it just like takes the memory from Docker. So I don't know what is going on behind it. It just like snapshots the memory from the Docker container.
And typically R won't release back. And I guess the Docker container is the OS at that point. And R doesn't usually release memory unless there's a GC invoked. So, okay.
Yeah, I tested the Shiny application that just went up until it reached the limit of the Docker container. It just like freezes my Docker engine. So yeah.
That sounds right.
It can happen.
Yep. Do you put most of your Shiny apps into Docker containers?
That depends. I love Docker, I use it on a daily basis, but that depends where it is to be deployed. So yeah, if it is to be deployed on AWS, Google Cloud, or Shiny Proxy, or things like that, I put them in Docker container. But if it needs to be deployed, for example, in Connect, I can put them into Docker because Connect doesn't expect a Docker container.
Yep.
So that depends on where the application has to be deployed.
There's a question asking, are there profiling tools that show where the code is spending its time?
Yeah, so there is Profviz, Profviz, which like is profiling the code. So if you have something which is slow, so it shows a flame graph with the code, so you can like identify where the code is slow. So Profviz, yeah.
That's probably the most famous one, the only one that I know of.
Yeah. It's a wrapper around, I think there is a base function that does this thing, but it's a wrapper around the base function. But what it does is that it shows a flame graph and it's interactive, so it's easier to manipulate.
You don't put a lot of emphasis on testing the UI, but have you played with VI-diff, or I think it's called VI-diff, or VI test, and how would you integrate that into your flow to test the visuals of, I guess, plots?
Yeah, I think so. As far as I see it, plots are not part of the UI. Plot is part of the business logic of your application, because for example, a ggplot can be generated outside of your Shiny app. So for me, a ggplot that shows like a model, a trend, or the data, I think it's the business logic bit, because it's part of what makes your application unique. And it's part for me of the business logic. So a plotting function would be put outside of your Shiny application and would be tested like with it's vdiffr, I think.
It might be vdiffr.
Yeah.
Right, cool. Yeah, that makes a good sense, because that is logic, and that just gets inserted in. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, what I'm talking about testing the UI is really, if you are really testing visual things, you are testing, the colors, the size of the divs, and the really like web design stuff. Not the core. The core interface.
Do you ever use custom HTML, or have someone else build it if you're not the person? Custom HTML as the front end instead of using the Shiny UI components?
Yeah, so I've put an example on my GitHub account lately of, I think a couple of weeks back, of how to integrate an external HTML template inside Shiny. So it uses a free template from W3 which is a web school. So it's an online website for learning web technologies. Yeah, we did that for our clients. So the idea is that we hired a company that does web design, and they created a series of web bootstrap components, and we binded them to Shiny, and then people had people using this. So it was a package. So we created a package with these bootstrap elements, which could be used just like a fluid page. So it had a series of custom action button, custom page, custom slider, which was a binding for these bootstrap elements. Yeah.
Any advice on how to perform Shiny app code review within a small team?
Oh.
Tough one.
Yeah. I think one of my main advice, I'm going to maybe stop sharing my screen. One of my main advice is really to try to focus on really separating these business logic things from the UI, because it same goes for, so it works well for testing, but it works well for code review, because if you want to review someone else's function, you don't have to, replay the application. It can be tested even if the app is not finished. Because one of the main issue when you are, if you mix everything in your Shiny application, is that if you want to test a function, you have to launch the application. But yeah, I don't know, a function that takes data frame that does some data manipulation and that outputs a data frame, which is then put into a data table. This score function, it should work outside Shiny, outside the interactive logic. So taking this function that also generate plots and everything, so put them into separate files, and it helps for code review because you can review only this function. You don't have to launch the full application just to check that the function works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that takes some discipline sometimes, but it pays dividends.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see similar, we try to do the same thing, but it's always like, oh, just write the quick 2 lines in the app and get it done with. That hurts you later.
Yeah, it's always a matter of trade-off, Just like with tests, you might think, I need to test everything, but you have to take decision because your time is limited. So you have to choose which part you are testing and which part you are not. So yeah, it's always a matter of trade-off.
That's why I need a dedicated QA team and let them do it all, right? Yeah, that doesn't, unless you had a giant company. I remember I was doing a project at a giant company and 3 people walked over to my desk and they're like, we're the QA team for this project. What do we need? And they just took care of it all. 3 people were assigned to QA.
Oh, nice.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. That doesn't always happen though. That's rare. Yeah. All right. I'll give everyone else a few more minutes. There's a few more moments, I should say, to see if there's any other questions about this. One question we do get, and the question is not necessarily about you particularly, the question is the slides. So if you can provide us the slides, we'll post them at nyhackr.org.
Sure.
Cool. Thank you.
Just going to correct some typos and send you the PDF.
That always happens. Yeah, the PDF, because I noticed that was Sharingan, right?
Yeah.
And the problem with Sharingan, I love Sharingan, but since it's not self-contained, it makes it very hard for us to host it because we need a single file we could put up on an S3 bucket. Yeah,
we printed to PDF.
Perfect. Yeah. And I have a long-running feature request in with UA to make it work self-contained. And he said he thinks he's going to crack it. As soon as he cracks it, I'm doing everything in Sharingan. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it makes like big HTML file in the end.
I don't mind. Like when I do IO slides, they're still 50 megabyte files, but they load, right? Yeah. With Sharingan, if you have a 20 megabyte file, it takes 5 minutes to load, and that's not an option. Yeah. I don't mind 50 megabytes. Oh, we have another question snuck in at the wire. Do any of the testing tools you talked about, besides test that, affect the code coverage detected by tools like CodeCov? Ooh.
Yeah, so if you are using Yeah, of course, if you're using Puppeteer to interact with your application, of course, it's not sketched by code curve. Yeah, and I think if you are testing, thing is that as if you are testing your interactive logic, you are launching your application in another process, and then you are performing actions. So you don't know what happens in the backend of this other process. So you don't know which function are called from this other process. So yeah, that won't help with code coverage.
Well, let me ask a question. Kara was the question asker. Are you talking about the stuff that Colin focused on, like cry and those tests, like shiny test? Or are you talking about the ones we mentioned briefly, like RUnit? Because I have a feeling RUnit might get captured by code coverage, but I have no clue. And I'd punt to Colin, but he doesn't use it that much.
Oh,
Or are you talking about cry and shiny test and the load test stuff? Give her a second to reply. I'm like juggling my screens trying to talking more about shiny test. So like for something like shiny test, could that be captured by code cov?
Yeah, not as far as I know, because it really launches like shiny in another process. So as it's another process, like we have no clue about what's happening inside this process, as far as I know.
Cool. Any other last minute takers here? Because I know it is getting late for Colin in France. He's been very gracious doing it even at 6 o'clock for us. We're trying to balance his sleep, but also letting people from not just New York, but the West Coast attend, because since it's virtual, we have people attending from the West Coast. We have people attending from Europe, I know we've had people from India and I believe
Nice.
Southeast Asia. So people from all over. I know South America. So thank you very much for giving us your time, your sleep time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It was a joy. I see someone is typing in Slack, so let's give that person just another second. Oh, it's just saying thanks. A lot of people are saying thanks right now in the different chats. So I will say my own thanks again. Thank you for coming all the way, but virtually coming all the way from across the ocean to be here with us. Just a reminder to everyone else, I want to thank Eagle Health Alliance and Scott's Pizza Tours. I like to remind everyone that we have Miles McBain coming from even farther than Colin came from. Yeah. He's going to be coming from Australia, so we got someone farther than you. Coming from Australia on August 10th as part of our week. And then August 12th through 15th, we have the conference, including Rob Heinemann also coming from Australia. He'll be kicking off the conference to accommodate the time change, and a bunch of other people, both local and from afar. And remember, use code NYHackR. And then stay tuned. In September, we tentatively have planned a talk about Linux. There won't be any data that I know of in this talk. It'll just be about how to customize your Linux experience. Then in October, we have someone coming from Scotland to speak to us. She's putting together her talk right now. Then November and December, we haven't finalized yet. So if anyone wants to give a talk, throw your hat into the ring for November and December. In November, we may be putting on a second conference, the DCR conference, virtually. We'll see how that goes. And maybe by January, we'll see what happens for those meetups. So we have the rest of the year mostly half planned out for the rest of the year, folks. So hopefully we'll keep that going. And since it doesn't seem like there's any other questions, hope everyone enjoys whatever food they're eating. And if someone's eating lasagna instead of pizza, which, yeah, sure. Colin, hopefully get some sleep. Everyone else, thank you very much. And I will see all of you next month. In the meantime, feel free to chat in the NYHackR Slack, ask questions, hang out. We'll be around. Michael Bagelmacher in New York's eating dried mango, which is, he gets it from the Brooklyn Co-op. It is fantastic. If you ever get the Brooklyn Co-op dried mango, Park Slope Co-op, the Park Slope Co-op, it is fantastic. So with that, another hearty thank you and a virtual applause for Colin, and we'll see all of you next month. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.